Hello and welcome to the Interpreting Wine, Drinks and Hospitality podcast. I'm of course your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. Across 8 episodes welcoming you to the Austrian wine producing region of Wagram. While I've covered several Austrian producers on the podcast, this is the first series featuring a deep dive of a single region, with all the episodes recorded with producers in Wagram in September 2019. In their own words, they'll introduce you to the geology, the history, the local grape varieties, winemaking styles, and of course, wines of the region. All of the producers are at least organic and some are biodynamic. And interestingly, many of these wines are not yet available in major overseas markets. And where producers are seeking representation, I've included details in each episode. So without further ado, here's today's episode of this Wagram special. Today's episode of the Wagram series features Martin Diwald of Bioweingut Diwald. He takes us through his own origin story and the fascinating early days in organics for his father. He gives us a virtual tour of their production, before leading us through a selection of their wines, a mixture of Gruener Veltliners, the Riesling and the Zweigelt, before talking Wagram Reds and looking ahead for the Weingut. Enjoy.
I'm from a winemaking family, so basically it's a very traditional background. But I think what makes our winery like a little bit unique is that my parents were one of the first organic winemakers in Austria, so they actually converted in 1980 to organic farming, and it was a time where, let's say, fertilizers and spraying agents were on the high peak. So what they actually did is that they both grew up on farms, and especially the one from my dad was quite good in the sense of it was a very modern farm for these days. So they used fertilizers. He had to use fertilizers, and then it was kind of the youth and the revolutionary young age. He kind of they went to a convention called Grüner Altbach, where they teach about climate and economics and organic something. So they actually went in a lecture in the wrong room, which is funny enough, but it's a true story. So they actually went in the wrong room and had a lecture of organic farmers from Südtirol. So in the 70s, there were a couple of organic farmers in terms of agriculture fields, not really for winemaking. So they went there and said, like, well, that actually sounds very interesting. So they came home, and then there are always some things which pull the trigger, kind of. And for my parents, it was like that. They just didn't understand why agriculture in these times are just going so wrong, in the sense of fertilizers, in the sense of spraying agents. I mean, these were times where they literally sprayed arsenic on plants just to kill it, and that was rather weird. So they actually converted in 1980, did the first wines, had a very rough time in sense of, because as you said before, it's all very, very small villages, no? So like in Gosing, we have 500 people, and people really asked them whether it has something to do with communism, because they just didn't understand it, and it was so difficult that they actually couldn't even, because there were some kindred spirits, like 3-4 wineries, some farmers who kind of tried to do organic farming, because there was no consultancy or institution. So they basically couldn't even meet at restaurants, because like the restaurant owner would have a hard time to explain himself to the other guests why he's hosting these kind of people. So it was quite rough. But yeah, I'm in a situation that my biggest asset is that my parents did those vineyards convert to organic in a very, very early stage. So we have vineyards, most of the vineyards never seen something else. So they always farmed organically. And for myself, so you have to know that winemaking school in Austria starts very early. So you start with sweet 15 or so to learn about wine. And at this time I didn't want to learn about wine. Like with 14 or 15 you have other thoughts, but you don't have thoughts about wine. So we made like this deal where I said, good, I'll make the winemaking school and let's see when I finish whether I like it or not. To be honest, it didn't take me very long to get into it. So after like a year or so, that was all set, and I was very into it. So I did winemaking school in Klosterneuburg, and then I graduated in 2006 with 19. And my dad actually had a heart surgery this year, so it's all fine now. But he basically was away for the harvest. So yeah, I was pushed into cold water very quickly, and I learned a lot within these 2 or 3 months in doing my first harvest. Not necessarily about how to make exactly the wine, because you try and do something and kind of try like the recipe from your dad if there is something. But you know, all these logistics things. So when do you have to pick this vineyard, and when do you have to pick the other one, and where do you have to put it in order to have some space left for the single vineyards? And so I was completely out of space, so I didn't really know what to do. But what I did is, in 2006 was that my dad never made very technical wines, but they used breeding yeast, they used nutrients, all that stuff. And then I came home, and already in my first harvest, I was kind of, I'm organic farming for such a long time, I don't really understand why we use all that stuff in the cellar. So I did, in my first year, I tried like my first try with natural yeast. So what we did is we harvested one batch of Grüner Veltliner and had it into exactly same size tanks, and one was with natural yeast and one was with breeding yeast. And basically what happened is that the year afterwards I did my whole production with natural yeast, and since then we're always trying to do like the fine tuning of the wine. So just to keep it in a very simple way. Wine making is no magic. We are not sorcerers who do like fancy stuff, but it's basically I'm trying to make like a very honest wine, and I think that also is reflected in the wine. So they are not super funky. They are usually very clean. They are some people wouldn't even recognize that it's natural yeast, but that's basically what we do. And I did then some vintages abroad. So I was in Germany, in Rheingau. I worked in New Zealand for Saracen Estate, where I kind of found out that it's like the new world is not quite my thing. So Saracen didn't do it this way, but I saw wineries which rather looked like a big power plant kind of making wine. So yeah, and there we are now.
Yeah, and like you say, then that's like kind of where we are now. It's I think what would be interesting as well is just to spend a little bit of time, just kind of, I guess, in a sense, give the listener a bit of that kind of virtual tour of what we just did back at the winery. Because I think the word that I we've written down and would use is that it's a very sort of human scale is what I'm seeing with a lot of the wineries here, including your own. So I just think a bit of a sense of the things we were looking at in terms of the materials, the tanks, and just the configuration, which I thought was quite interesting.
So the thing is that we came from a mixed farm, but then basically went into just winemaking, and that's also how it developed. So we always had wooden barrels, which we still keep, but we are not dogmatic persons in the sense of technology is bad. So basically, what we do is that it's an old farmhouse from the 16th, 17th century. We have our winery in a shed from built 1930. So we do have a tradition somehow to use old buildings, old stuff, and kind of bringing it into the new era. That is also what we try of our vineyard. So we are currently farming about 20 hectares of wine, which is separated or is like in 45 different vineyards. So we do have a lot of slopes, we do have a lot of plateaus, terraces. That also gives us the chance to work in a very selective way. So we do have quite a lot of tanks and barrels in our cellar. So I counted it once. I think it's something about 45 or so. So we rather do like selective picking and selective winemaking, and then be able to make the final blend rather than having like one big tank and then it has to work. So that also leads me to the picking. So we basically hand pick everything. But again, if it's raining for 2 weeks and I have to choose between getting my vineyards kind of die and just have rot material, I will also go for harvest machine, which I think it's no evil thing, but I just don't like the idea of everything getting replaced by machines, and the human being is kind of just the operator and trying that it's oiled properly and it's charged and that then it's working. So that's just something I don't really want to. So this is the reason why we always try to do lots of handiwork if I can choose. So if I can choose between a machine and people, and I see okay, it is fairly fair, then I rather go with the people doing the work than the machine. So that's my philosophy when it comes to to overall farming also.
Yeah, one of the things I love about having the portability, I guess, with the podcast equipment is that we can take interviews out of the studio or out of the tasting room, and we can kind of go wherever. So I think before we have you taste some of the wines and we discuss some of the wines, really, I would just like to just take a little while just for you to listen and know where we are, because it's it's a pretty it feels like a pretty special place where we're sitting this afternoon.
So listeners, can you hear the birds? No. So basically we are in an old vineyard shed, which is it's a very, very little house / shed where people used to hide when it was raining. So they did the work there. They didn't have cars or couldn't afford them. So they walked to the vineyards, worked there. As soon as it was raining, they had something to hide. And we found actually this vineyard shed in the middle of a lot of trees, and we made some space. My dad and a trainee a couple of years ago made a handmade table where we're right now sitting. Very, very old-fashioned, so it's just some wooden parts put together where I can sit and drink some wine. That's how it looks. We have wild roses next to us, walnut trees, wild plums, all that stuff. Yeah, just nature.
Tough life, isn't it?
And a hammock. The best
way, really, to to really express all of that, I think, is then into bringing that all forward into, tasting some of the wines that you brought along for us. So yeah, kind of over to you.
The first wine we're tasting is called Grüner Veltliner from Loess. So from Loess is the soil. Yes, Loess is a wind-blown soil, basically consisting of silicates, chalk, and dust. We have up to 30% chalk. That means you get wines with a lovely acidity, with some nice texture. And this one is basically a vineyard plant of different vineyards grown on Loess soil. It's hand-picked, it's whole bunch press in order to get it lean. It's natural yeast in stainless steel on the lees for roughly half a year. And yeah, not a lot of winemaking. For me, a very nice expression of like this spicy, herbal, light kind of Grüner Veltliner, but still having a nice structure. So we talk here about 12% alcohol, but still having like a little phenolic character, which I always find rather sexy in wines to have this.
Yeah, it's been a theme, I guess, going through that. I guess everybody's had their own kind of entry level Grüner Veltliner, and I think it's coming through here definitely. Yeah, something in the approach, something in the winemaking that is maybe a little bit leaner than some of the others, which as you say, we've heard a lot about Loess through the series. So that all of those nutrients, those water holding capabilities, it does mean that it's the Grüner and whatever grapes I guess are planted there, they don't have to struggle so much. You don't have as hard a time. So as we kind of were speaking a bit about earlier, that it can make the wines a lot sort of broader, and this is just super kind of refreshing, not massively complex, I would say, but it's just a really good drinking wine.
So the next wine we taste is Gosing Grüner Veltliner. So Gosing is the name of the village, hence it's a village wine. Very easy. Why did we do Gosing? It's for us a new wine. It's the first vintage we do with this wine. The reason is that years are getting warmer and warmer, or years are getting more unpredictable. And what we want to show is that there is also a very big difference between the single villages, and on top it gives us the opportunity to have this blending opportunity from colder areas and hotter areas. So this one is a wine. One part is from a site called Gosing Goldberg, which is rather warm, and the other side is called Veltliner. You probably tasted some wines from there. It's a rather cold area. And also here it's basically made roughly the same way as the first wine from Loess. So it's hand-picked, it's whole bunch press, and it was just bottled like 10 days ago. So it was on the full lease, roughly 10 months. And that's for me. You have super nice structure. You have like this Loess soil, which always gives like this peppery, like herbal notes, and also here probably like a little bit more than the Loess. You have some phenolics in the back, giving you the grip of what I think is important for a wine to don't get boring, kind of.
With second Grüner and village level, I think it's a noticeable step up in the complexity there, and we were just sort of Googling and looking at what some of the herbs might be there, because it's definitely maybe some parsley or coriander. There's definitely more herbaceous edge to that. It's still sort of classic Grüner, but definitely more minerality, more herbaceousness coming out there. So really nice.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
Okay, let's carry on. Next wine is Riesling. It's actually our top level Riesling from the single vineyard Eisenhut. We still have it before the other one because it's dry, and the other one is a little off dry. It is from vintage 2017. Eisenhut means iron hat. So it's basically all south slopes. Loess soil, you can find some iron stones. Always very late ripening, rather low on sugar levels, so it's never massive wines. So they always have, usually Eisenhut is somewhere between 12.5, maybe a little bit more, but always dry. For me, is Riesling my big love, kind of, because Wagram is probably known for Grüner Veltliner and for Rot Veltliner. As I told Lawrence before, I don't even have a single. I think we do have some Rot Veltliner wines popping up here and there, but we don't have a vineyard and we don't work it. Because I just sometimes, I do really like elegant and lean wines and not like big monsters. Rot Veltliner tend to be rather big wines, which I can understand if somebody likes it. I don't. That's also the reason why I don't do it. Yeah, so the Eisenhut Riesling single vineyard 2017. Again, whole bunch press, natural yeast in stainless steel, then on the lees for roughly 10 months. Like a little bit of sugar left, I think 4 or 5 grams. Riesling never ferments completely through. Next wine is called Riesling Ried Goldberg, also single vineyard, also 2017 vintage. Also here, the problem is I can't really tell you a lot about winemaking, as we have like kind of a minimal approach towards winemaking, and sometimes you're a little bit lazy in good terms. But this is like single vineyard Goldberg. It's basically made exactly the same way than the Eisenhut. They have a distance of, I think, 400-500 meters from one vineyard to the next one, and tastes very, very differently. So on the Eisenhut, I always have this kind of not very mineral Riesling, but you get some minerals, you get some ripe fruit, but you also get a very nice acidity, like a little bit of phenolics, very lean character. If we talk about the Goldberg, it's like the friendly guy next to it. It always contains much more sugar, just in a natural way. So it's an off-dry Riesling. Because of the reason it just doesn't ferment through, and I'm not the pusher. So if it stops, it stops, and it usually always stops because, it would have potential alcohol of, I don't know, 13.5, 14, and Riesling doesn't like to ferment anyway. So So this is for me, it's a very, very, very nice example of Loess Riesling. So Loess always gives like this ripe fruit. You got like apricots and peaches and less mineralic style than the Eisenhut or the other regions in Austria or Germany.
Yeah, it's loving the descriptions here, and I think also maybe just because as we say across the series we have heard lots and lots about the Rot Veltliner and its place here. I think it's maybe also worth through these two wines just talking a little bit. I've been very impressed with the Riesling. I think it really has seemed to express something really interesting. It's I think maintained in a lot of times. I think that acidity. The acidity hasn't always been crazily high, but here in the Ried Goldberg, I'm somebody who's generally quite sensitive to a lot of residual sugar as I see it. But you're telling me it's like 17 grams of residual sugar. But it's super in balance, super nice length. There's still all that sort of the apricot, the sort of the citrusy. It feels like a complete wine. It doesn't feel too sort of overblown to have that amount of residual sugar in there. It's still super fresh, and I guess that's what you kind of need as well in the finish to keep you wanting to reach for another glass. It's not going to tire out your palate.
So we're going a little bit off the beaten path now. So it's Grüner Veltliner fermented on skins. The name of the wine is called Zündstoff, which means kind of explosive, in a certain way. but also like a topic can have a certain Zündstoff. Yeah? So like when people argue about something, and people like to argue about natural wine or skin fermented wine in particular, and that's the reason we called it Zündstoff. We had a different name, so there's this song from Queen called Killer Queen where it says it's guaranteed to blow your mind. It was far too long for the label, so that was the reason why we didn't choose it. So the wine is called Zündstoff, Gruener with the Maischegärung. So Austrians like to do it complicated. So Maischegärung means skin fermentation, and that's basically what it is. So it's fermented on skins for 10 days. Then it's pressed just once, very lightly, goes into old oak barrels for a year. Then straight into bottle, no filtration, no fining, a hint of sulfur just to get it from the barrel to the bottle. Yeah, it's like the one guy doing the steaks, no, with the salt. Yeah, it's like no, it's just very like I think it was 10 ppm of sulfur. So for all the listeners who are not completely wine geeks, so it's I think 150 you're allowed to have it there. It's 10, so it's really like a tiny amount. And for me it's just very cool to see what the grape can express if you do like a skin fermentation. So for me, skin fermented wines, if they are good, they have the same direction of style compared to the normal wine, just always a little bit more candied and tea-ish. So you have like this fruit, but like in a tea sense, you have like these herbal notes, but also like rather on a tea sense, like black tea and that all. So yeah.
Okay. No, I got to say I love the description of the way that you treat this wine, I guess, and the kind of wine that you're trying to make as well, and just that it's in the same line, and almost you just sort of almost doing a bit of composing. You're just sort of turning up different elements there, and I love it because I think sometimes you have orange wines that are like as young as this, and you'll often be told you've got to let it wait. It's not ready yet. You've got to let those tannins kind of integrate and come into line, and time will kind of take the edges off it. But I think it's lovely now. This is really, as you say, in that same sort of line, noticeably more orange and noticeably more sort of a bit more exuberant, I would say would be the word I'd use here. But still just a pleasure to drink, which again at the end of the day, that's what we want, isn't it?
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And I really think that orange wines, skin fermented wines, it reminds me a little bit on the barrique wines in the 90s. So when they all came up with toasted small oak barrels, and the first wines, many of them were just overdone. So shitloads of toasting, sorry to use the word, but it's like a lot of very heavy like wines which just tasted like the barrel. And I think sometimes winemakers do the same thing with skin fermented wines. So sometimes I get the feeling, if I'm allowed or if I'm able to tell, you had it on the skins for 365 days and then it's super cool. The thing is, you can let it on skins for 365 days, but then let it mature in your own cellar for 5 years before releasing it. And there are some very good examples doing that. But very often it's like these wines are sometimes a little bit overdone and then they are too young for the market. And that's also the reason why we just go for a week or 10 days. So we taste it. We still want to have it on the elegant, not too jammy side. So last wine we are going to Ried, Luft and Liebe Zweigelt. So Luft and Liebe means air and love, and that's basically what this wine got. So what we did is in July, so it's from a Goldberg vineyard. What we did is that in July we cut every single bunch in half, So you get very, very loose bunches, so you can ripen it longer outside. And then it's fermented on skins in stainless steel for roughly a week, 10 days. And then it goes into 40-year-old acacia barrel for 18 months without any sulfur, hence the name Air. And like a lot of love from me, so I'm treating it very, very well. And then it's like after this 1.5 years in barrel, we sulfur it just before the bottling, like I think it was 15 ppm or so. No filtration, no fining. And for me, this wine reminds me a little bit of Gamay, a little bit of Beaujolais in this whole fruit. It's not like a very full-bodied wine. It's a very for me it's very elegant and very easy wine, but with a certain tannin structure, with a certain grip. You can chill it a little bit. For me, very, very clean, very, very clear fruit.
And I think, the only thing I'd really add is that I think this is potentially, one of those kind of a little bit deceptive wines. I think you can just enjoy this and not think too much about it. But I think actually, maybe a little bit with the winemaking, maybe a little bit with the site and the soils. But there I think there are sort of layers of complexity there that you can sort of
definitely.
you can pick out, and just a super interesting example. And maybe just it leads then naturally into sort of a kind of a last question specifically about the wines. Then I mean, it's just been noticeable a little bit, that there's been way less reds, I guess, covered in this series than the whites, and that's I guess obviously due to the status of Gruener and Grüner Veltliner and Rote Veltliner in the region. And I just not a specific question, but I'm just curious to get your idea of what do you think the reds potentially can offer from this region, because as I say, I think it's the ones that I've tried I've really enjoyed. So I think it might just be helpful to share something about those.
So basically what I think is that especially for light, nicely structured reds, it is a very good region. It's still a cool climate region. So if you're looking for wines which do not have too much alcohol, which are not like very, very full-bodied wines, but light wines which you also might want to enjoy in summer or so, then it's a really, really good region. I think the thing is to really make good examples, you need a lot of work in the vineyard. As I said before, it's here we cut every single bunch in half. It takes as long as picking, and due to the fact that we are a cool climate region, we need this on top ripening period. So if you don't do it, if you have if the yield is too big, then you will get rather unripe, ambivalent, I don't know whether it's an English word, but wines where I say, okay, why shall I drink it? If you do it in a proper way, I think you can get very, very nice examples also of Zweigelt.
I really enjoyed obviously the setting here, which again, we're not saying it to rub the nose of the listener in, but it's just a beautiful spot to taste in. And I think just to kind of finish off, really just I guess a bit about take us away from Austria and outside. I know that you've got 70% of your production is being exported. I know quite well the importers in the UK. So just kind of broadly open question around how are these wines being enjoyed out there, and what do you sort of foresee off into the future for the winery and some of those markets?
So basically most of our wines come to a certain extent to the restaurant sector sooner or later, and I think that's where they can really play their card. It is the last years also international cuisine went more and more into very nice your ingredients, very nice products, less products. The meals are getting like more elegant, and I think that's also what the wines have to be. So we are doing wines which are not big monsters, so they're not standing in front of a meal, and that's basically where the wines go. So we do have like a lot of business in the more northern countries, like in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Sweden, in England. We do have, of course, Germany, a little bit of USA, a little bit of Asia, but basically that's where to go, and that's also the goal for the future. I mean, we are at the point where I really, really enjoy what I'm doing. So I have no intention to grow, to be honest. It's like what we do is really what I want to do, and I'm still like in the field where I really can do physical work and make the wine, and not being a manager, and that's where I want to stay. So basically more of the same. Do a little bit of fine tuning. Really, like for me, it's always like to become a really good winery is to have a certain style. To have this style over years that people, and for me, it's like I don't want to be a supernatural winemaker, or I don't want to be like someone else. I just want to make my wines, and I want to have Diwald on the spotlight, that if you drink these wines, you might recognize them sooner or later somewhere else, because that's something I've in mind. That's how they taste, and that's actually the goal we have, to build like our own style, which is of course linked to the region, which is of course linked to the specific grapes, but basically we try not to look too much to the left and too much to the right and copy something, but we just do our thing.
Thank you so much, Martin. It was an absolutely fantastic spot to enjoy the tasting and hear your story, and a really thoughtful discussion of the grapes and the region in which you're growing. Do of course check below for the website, main social media handles and email address for Weingut Diwald. And of course do check out the entire Wagram series and listen to any episodes you might have missed. Just head over to interpretingwine.com/Wagram for a playlist with all 8 episodes. This being the final episode of the Wagram series, it's only left to say a huge thank you to all of the wineries who participated. I think that through each of your stories you introduced the listener to the region, but I think each of you also demonstrated your own individual identity, both in the history and of course in the quality of the wines. And I really recommend anybody listening to either seek out these wines where you're based, and indeed to visit the region should you happen to be in Austria or close by. And seeing this is the most in-depth coverage I've ever given to a single wine-growing region, I would love to have your feedback. You can reach me on Instagram and Facebook, where I'm at Interpreting Wine, on Twitter, where I'm at Wine Podcast, or email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.